This is the kind of work that I've been doing for a really long time, and to be able to do it here in my new home of the UK means quite a bit to me.
There was no guidance.
Thank all of you for being able to be here, be a part of this success story.
I will say I went into it naively.
We have to do something to change this.
For many years, advertisers have used the buzzword empowerment to sell brands, products and ideas. Buying a company's product has become synonymous with feeling empowered. During Meghan's short but memorable stay in the UK, she made use of this marketing ploy to launch the SmartWorks capsule collection. Which persuasion techniques does Meghan use, and what are their potential effects and consequences? How do we become better at recognizing the ploys that celebrities and companies use in persuading us? Hang on until the end, because this speech is something else. Time to get the show on the road.
So, I thought that it would probably be helpful for you to understand how we ended up here today and why this collection was so important to conceive based on the visits and what I was seeing when I was on site at SmartWorks. And let's maybe go back a little bit. Should I hold for sound? They're grateful back there. I thought that it would probably be helpful for you to...
Meghan begins the speech like a CEO would begin a meeting. Helpful for you is distinct from the personal pronoun I in.
I thought...
Linguistically, this makes Meghan the authority. However, with the inclusive pronoun we and the collective let's
understand how we ended up here. And let's maybe go back a little.
She quickly makes it a shared experience, as if everyone is in this together, and as if what Meghan's seen is important to everyone and not just to her. Meghan turns what's actually product branding and self-branding into a shared experience, and thus she creates a sense of community. Companies also do this, making people feel like they're part of something bigger, even though most times they aren't.
When I first moved to the UK, it was incredibly important to me personally to be able to connect with people on the ground doing really important work. And one of the places that I went to very early on was SmartWorks.
Meghan equates connecting with people on the ground to going to SmartWorks. She goes on to explain the perceived importance of the organization, but considering that she could have connected with people in a million different ways, it's noteworthy that the direct link between connecting with people on the ground and going to SmartWorks isn't substantiated. That's how it's made clear that this is about self-branding first and foremost, to portray herself as being at eye level with ordinary people, even though the phrase on the ground could imply that she's speaking from an elevated position, which potentially could make it harder for people in the audience to identify themselves with her.
It was incredibly important to me personally.
With this utterance, Meghan overemphasizes her involvement and wish to engage with ordinary people. Firstly, with the adverb incredibly, which intensifies the adjective important, and secondly, with the adverb personally, which intensifies the object me. She's already said me, so strictly speaking, there's no reason to say personally as well. Thus, the emphasis in this speech is on Meghan. The self-branding continues as she goes on to mention some of her groundbreaking work.
Now, funny enough, and purely by coincidence, it was just a year ago at this same time that I was working on a project in Grenfell with this woman at a community center called Almanar, and that's when we put together the Together cookbook. So though this is a year later, and obviously this is fashion, not food, at its core, these are very similar projects because they're about women who are empowering each other, me being able to have the opportunity to meet them, get to know them, learn from them, and then say, what can I do in some small way? How can I try to help you amplify this? How can we make this even better, greater, and more impactful for the women that you're trying to help? Funny enough, and purely by coincidence, it was just a year ago at this same time.
It's hard to see what's significant about this. Projects typically last longer than a day, so there's a high probability that the time for these projects would be the same, especially if you're putting together a book.
And that's when we put together the Together cookbook.
And she herself says working, which indicates a process.
That I was working on a project.
So this is Meghan's way of making her advertising sound more special than it is. Very similar projects, Meghan says, as she goes on to mention one of the most generic connections possible.
These are very similar projects because they're about women who are empowering each other.
Women are encouraged to think about themselves as group members first and foremost, who think and want the same simply because of the innate characteristics they happen to share. Making people think about themselves as group members rather than as individuals is the easiest way for celebrities and politicians to encourage, amaze, shock, or upset people and thus control them. This passage is an opportunity for Meghan to highlight her involvement and supposed willingness to learn, making her seem humble in the process.
And then say, what can I do in some small way?
Just in case the audience had any doubt about Meghan's good qualities.
Better, greater, and more impactful for
Better, greater, and impactful all convey more or less the same information or lack thereof. So this is overemphasis, which is prominent in speeches in order to make the speaker seem that more innovative, humble, or whatever's needed to get people to buy the product, brand, or idea. Next, she keeps emphasizing the changes she's made. But of course, it's completely believable when she says she only wants to help in a small way, because she totally doesn't want to help in a way that gives her as much credit as possible.
So, on my visits to SmartWorks, one of the times that I went, I realized there was a little bit of a challenge in terms of styling for the women because we had a lot of donations, but not necessarily the things that women needed to have. I said, okay, well, let's try to work with what we have and make the best of it. And then the next time I went, you'll remember this, there was a rack of about 40 or 50 lilac-colored blazers. Now, don't get me wrong. It's a great blazer, and I'm sure for someone, it's exactly what she wants to be wearing.
By poking fun at the organization's implied lack of innovation, Meghan can make her changes seem that more innovative in touch and impactful. The organization's supposed lack of innovation is highlighted by Meghan's mention of how she tried to be overbearing at first.
I said, okay, well, let's try to work with what we have and make the best of it. And I'm sure for someone, it's exactly what she wants to be wearing.
I've no doubt that Meghan believes that. Everything about her body language and the fact that she just finished laughing at the organization's collection can't be anything but authentic. Next, she goes in infomercial mode. She starts with a generalization, making it easier for women to identify themselves with her description. Potentially, that is.
But for most women, when you're going in there and you want to have a job interview and you want to feel your very best and you want to feel confident, you want to be wearing the pieces of clothing that make you feel that way, and not the leftovers that didn't sell from the end of the season.
The leftovers that didn't sell from the end of the season. A statement like that makes her previous statement even more believable.
And I'm sure for someone, it's exactly what she wants to be wearing.
With
You want to be wearing the pieces of clothing that make you feel that way.
she's creating a so-called second persona in the speech. The second persona is the ideal consumer that the speaker has in mind, how the speaker wants the consumer to think and behave. Thus, the audience is implicitly encouraged to identify themselves with this persona, identify as a confident career woman. Speakers use these second personas in order to instruct the audience what to think, become, or do. Next, she continues to emphasize how she worked at innovating the brand, and marketing ploys are exposed in the process. Let's watch.
And I kept thinking about it as I went home, and it didn't track for me, and I said, we have to do something to change this. And a big piece of this is trying to transform the idea of charity to community. And the way that we do that, I think, as people, is when we go into our closet as a woman and you say, I'm going to make a donation, you don't go through your closet and just toss in a box whatever you don't care about anymore. That's charity as we know it today. Community is going through your closet and saying, this is the blazer that I wore when I nailed my first job interview and got my dream job. And I don't need that anymore because I'm where I want to be. But if I'm able to share that blazer and be part of another woman's success story, then that's community.
Yes, because that's how people think about their clothes.
And I kept thinking about it as I went home, and it didn't track for me, and I said, we have to do something to change this.
The we only comes in when it's rhetorically relevant for Meghan to associate with other people, because she needs them to support her ideas. Thus, it's implied that Meghan came up with these changes, with imagined quotes that are quite extensive and prove a quite vivid imagination, and the possessive pronoun your.
Going through your closet and saying, this is the blazer that I wore when I nailed my first job interview.
Meghan keeps appealing to the second persona, the ideal consumer she wants the audience to identify themselves with. However, first and foremost, Meghan's revealing that all the nice-sounding talk about community is nothing more than a tactic, because what she doesn't tell the audience, and what's implied here, is that it's all about getting people to think they become part of a community, and don't just buy a product. This is right out of the handbook of corporate branding, The knowledge that today's consumers don't just buy products for what they are, but for what they mean, and for the community, the perceived community they get to be part of when buying the product. For example, people who buy a Rolex don't just buy a watch, but also the connotations of the watch, perceived luxury and status, and become part of an exclusive community, or so they're led to believe. So in a larger perspective, Meghan actually touches on the fact that CEOs and political leaders don't repeat buzzwords because they have good hearts, because there's nothing heartfelt about it. An example of this is Bob Iger, CEO of Disney. He talks about buzzwords like diversity and inclusion as being good for commerce.
I felt that it was time for Marvel's storytelling to much better reflect the world we were doing business in. I'm a big believer in that, whether you call it diversity or inclusion. But the bottom line is that doing so is good for commerce.
With this, he makes it clear that to him it's about money. Therefore, when an actress like Rachel Zegler talks about her role as being important for diversity, standing up for her community, this talk is exposed as a calculating tactic, not heartfelt concern for diversity and the community she claims to represent.
Being an amazing Latina woman as Snow White, like, you are opening so many doors for your whole community as well. Like,
yeah, I mean, and obviously for my community, it's a huge moment. You just want to do right by your community so badly. And I know that Snow White is a huge moment for them.
The diversity or inclusion, doing so is good for commerce.
Money is what it's about, but they can't say that because it doesn't sound nice. So one of the ways CEOs hide this agenda is to arrange scripted interviews that contain community-based appeals to people's emotion and pity. CEOs, and Meghan, rely on their target audiences to view themselves as group members, not as individuals who, despite their shared innate characteristics, can be very different from each other in terms of opinions, goals, and dreams. Meghan's words,
But if I'm able to share that blazer and be part of another woman's success story,
underline this groupthink, which many intelligent people don't find empowering, but condescending.
And so when I thought about it in that personal space, I said, on a bigger level, what can we do with brands, and what companies would be able to help us convene and come together to really build a collection for the women of SmartWorks that could be the pieces that they need to feel confident going into those rooms. This is sort of how we thought of the SmartWorks capsule collection.
Initially, Meghan keeps making the distinction between I and we. When it comes to ideas, she doesn't say we thought or we said, but I thought and I said.
And so when I thought about it in that personal space, I said,
She shifts to we when she's speaking for the organization as a result of her thoughts and statements.
what can we do with brands? And
At the end, she says we thought for the first time.
this is sort of how we thought of the SmartWorks capsule collection.
So, how much of this was only Meghan's ideas and thoughts? Her pronoun shifts make it unclear. Also, is this message actually empowering? That you need to wear certain clothes to feel confident? No, that's a tactic that advertisers have used for decades to make people feel insecure or less secure about what they're wearing. And the truth is, confidence comes from within. Even a CEO should be able to sit in an old t-shirt and still feel confident. If he can't, chances are he's in the wrong line of work. What are you doing down there? It's the chair again, sir. I'd like to have a new one, sir. No, it's not the chair that's the problem. Lately, you haven't been as inclusive as usual. And you know how much this company values inclusivity, right? You know what you need? A new chair? You need to feel confident. You need to feel empowered. Here, try this on. Right now? Right now. Are you feeling empowered now? I don't know, sir. You don't know because it's so empowering, right? Just think about all the people who want it. I don't feel a difference, sir. Can I put my sweater back on? You can, but then I can no longer guarantee that you'll be this company's most inclusive employee. Meghan has a habit of emphasizing that she has good and dear friends in prominent places in society, and in the next clip she doesn't miss the opportunity to remind people of one of them. Because as we all know, when someone's actually a good or dear friend, you totally have a need to state it publicly.
The first designer that I thought of immediately was a really good friend of mine, Nisha Nunu, who has spent a lot of time with her brand ethos developing women's empowerment, but also specifically a capsule wardrobe. So you have key pieces that you can mix and match and really maximize what you have. We all know that in your
the
closet,
opportunity we
right?
have
You
here
have
to
certain pieces that you can take from 4 items of clothing and suddenly you have 10 outfits. So that was really important. We all know that, right?
Meghan appeals to alleged shared knowledge. Appeals to shared knowledge have an inbuilt preference for agreement. Inbuilt preferences for agreement make disagreement harder or uncomfortable. This way, Meghan keeps loading the second persona, and thus what she wants the audience to think and believe, with presuppositions. They're actually her presuppositions, but she makes it sound like everybody has them and knows what she's talking about. Next, she goes back to saying, "I thought."
Separately, I thought, if this is going to be classics and essentials, what are traditional and quintessential British brands that I've become introduced to once I moved here that for me resonated and I knew would resonate with a SmartWorks customer? And that seemed obvious to do M&S and John Lewis, which I've worn quite a bit in the past year or two since I've been here, and they thankfully said yes as well, as did Nisha.
This isn't so much a speech as it's a long ad break. Meghan seizes the opportunity to show that she cares about the country she's moved to, for the time being.
What are traditional and quintessential British brands?
It's also made clear that Meghan's actually the second persona. It's her thoughts and ideas
That for me resonated and I knew would resonate with a SmartWorks customer.
So, she's the confident SmartWorks customer that the audience should recognize in the speech and identify themselves with. And next, it's time for buzzwords.
And the last company that I wanted to have be a part of this project was Jigsaw. And truth be told, that was because I had seen a campaign they had done the year before that was really highlighting the diversity of the UK and the immigrant culture and how that was part of the fabric of the nation. And when I saw that, I was so touched by it. And I said, anyone who's seeing the world that way and seeing the community that way is someone that I think would be a great partner to have on this project. And truth be told,
since honesty is presupposed in speeches as well as conversations, why the sudden need to appeal to it? It couldn't be because this isn't honest or entirely honest, could it? That she just mentions an unspecific cliché like diversity to virtue signal. No, she doesn't have a habit of doing precisely that.
And just, I love women who I am able to look up to and say, they have done so much in terms of leadership, but also promoting diversity and what she's, like USA Network especially, I feel really proud of.
Oh, it was good for commerce.
Of course, Meghan was touched by it.
I was so touched by it.
That must be why she never explains why it's good. Why bother with specifics if people only need clichés in order to be convinced?
The diversity.
That's the point of presuppositional rhetoric. The speaker not only presupposes that everybody knows what he or she is talking about, but also that everybody agrees with it. Presuppositional rhetoric is used for complexity reduction, to make complex issues sound simple and obvious, and to make it difficult and/or uncomfortable for people to disagree with the speaker.
So they all said yes, and that was a great start. And so thank you so much for that.
When you're part of the royal family, people have a tendency to say yes to you, irrespective of the originality of your ideas.
As we've seen this evolve, I think what's been really amazing is to know that these women will now be equipped in a project that will just be a couple weeks, but will give us enough units to be able to have the women at SmartWorks have these key essentials for a year. And that in and of itself, to be able to have one small project that has such big impact, is something that I'm really connected to.
She's also really connected to specific ways of phrasing her self-branding, what she wants the audience to think about her. She used similar word choice in her UN speech.
When the soap manufacturer changed the commercial, I realized the magnitude of my actions. At the age of 11, I had created my small level of impact.
And that in and of itself, to be able to have one small project that has such big impact, is something that I'm really connected to.
Humble brag is a modest statement that's used to make the speaker's achievement sound that more impressive. Thus, underlining her small impact or small project, she makes the impact and project seem more impressive. A small project with a big impact, who wouldn't be connected to that? Asking who wouldn't think this is oftentimes the best way to discover that self-praise is the speaker's real agenda. Next, she appeals to ethos, which is also part of most companies' ad campaigns, as it builds trust, potentially.
This is the kind of work that I've been doing for a really long time, and to be able to do it here in my new home of the UK means quite a bit to me. It's also the same vein of work that my husband and I will continue doing, really strong community-based projects, and this is something that we'll be excited to be able to share more about next year when we launch our foundation, Sussex Royal, in 2020.
The key word here is community-based, a word with positive connotations but potentially negative consequences. While communities are great if you share a hobby, communities based on surface-level things like shared innate characteristics are limiting when it comes to having opinions and goals that go against the group. However, getting people to think in terms of communities, no matter how literally superficial these communities are, is the easiest way to control them. Advertisers, politicians, and Meghan know that.
So I think at the end of the day, I just want to thank all of you for being able to be here, be a part of this success story for these women. I think it's really key in this day and age that we remember it's not just about the people that you know that you're supporting. It's about the people that you don't know, that you may never know, you may never meet. As women, it is 100% our responsibility, I think, to support and uplift each other, to champion each other as we aim to succeed, to not set each other up for failure, but instead to really be there rallying around each other and say, I want to help you.
I like the subtle self-praise.
So I think at the end of the day, I just want to thank all of you for being able to be here, be a part of this success story.
Making consumers think they're becoming part of a success story is another way that advertisers make brands and products more appealing. Also, the generic nature of her recommendations and the absence of specifics are common in advertising. What does it mean to uplift, champion, and help each other? That's completely dependent on the situation. If someone does or says something wrong, they shouldn't be uplifted, regardless of the gender they happen to have. However, that's where groupthink inevitably leads, to praising things that shouldn't be praised, because people don't dare go against the group. That's how it's made clear that the statements about strong community-based projects are empty jargon. The speaker knows it, but has to use this jargon as a stepping stone to the direct advertising for the brand or product. And next, Meghan goes in full infomercial mode.
And you may not ever meet that person, but you'll know when you put on that blazer or that shirt, or you carry that tote or put on those trousers or that dress, that some other woman on the other side of this country is wearing that piece because you made that purchase. And that's why the one-for-one model I found was so incredibly important, and that's why I'm really touched that everyone agreed to do this business model in that way.
Even though what Meghan's presenting here as original and touching isn't much different from the concept of thrift shops, except that she allegedly wants people to really think about who's worn it, as if many or most people even want to think about that. And to underline the success story that she presupposes that this is, Meghan doesn't mind sharing a funny little anecdote. I don't know about you, but it certainly made me smile.
One quick thing that I found out as we were in the car on the way over here was that the tote's already sold out online. So that's great.
I know we all want to have time to clap along, so final clip.
And my hope is for any of the brands, if you do have that level of success that you're seeing really early on, to hopefully amplify what you've been able to already be so generous in doing with your contribution, and extend it for just a little bit more so that everyone can play a part in this shared success story.
Did I mention it's a success story? Funny how the success story was mentioned in the same breath as contributions. It couldn't be because she knows that people make contributions if they think it's already a success story, even though this is only a launch. Using corporate branding tactics to make contrived ideas sound groundbreaking isn't new. On the contrary, it's common for companies and individuals to present undefined buzzwords as if they're important and profound. Self-aggrandizing motives are hid by the same pathos appeals to the same so-called communities, when all it's really about is to make as many people from these communities as possible buy a given product or buy into an idea. This way, the younger generation is taught that consumerism leads to better lives and feeling better about themselves, when nothing could be further from the truth. What do you think about this touching speech? Let us know in the empowering comments. Have a nice day with lots and lots of success stories that you're really connected to.